By the way, I've been curious about something.
What's that?
Do you think that at some point you could edit my voice to be like Daft Punk's? Like, do you know how to do that?
Yeah, totally.
Really?
I'm just gonna vocode everything that you just said, actually.
Okay, cool.
It'll be fun.
Hello, and welcome to the Interstate Gamers Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, aka K-Slugs.
My name is Peter, aka Duo for Real, and I'm also your host.
So as you know, on this podcast, we rate and discuss some of our favorite video games, and, well, we've yet to do some of our not so favorite. I know we've talked about that a lot, but maybe it happens.
They're coming.
Yeah, they're coming. But anyway, welcome back, guys. We're excited to bring you episode 3 of season 2. It's going to be a good one. But before we get into that, I want to talk about some things that have been going on with IG recently. First of all, if you haven't heard, we released our new merch line, and it's been pretty awesome. I want to thank all of those who went out and got some sweet IG swag already. We really appreciate it, and we hope you're enjoying all the merchandise we made for you. If you get your IG apparel, please tag us on social media so we can give you a good old-fashioned retweet and show you some love back.
Yeah, and also keep on the lookout for updates on that because we do have some more designs kind of kicking that we want to design and launch eventually. So, and whenever new designs get uploaded to our TeePublic store, they automatically go on sale for 3 days, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely announce any developments on that end on Twitter as well. But yeah, we have some fun ideas and we can't wait to get them out to the world and onto your bodies.
Yeah, man, Peter's doing a really dope ass job on those t-shirts. So good job, buddy. Really proud of you.
Thanks, man.
Secondly, if you aren't aware yet, we made our rankings. We now display them on a much more user-friendly website than just a spreadsheet, and it's kind of easier for people to conceptualize and visualize. At least I think. So I made that website for you guys. You can now sort by like the episode number and the IG score. I plan to add more features to the site in the future and more category sorts and things like that. But you can go there and get a really good visual representation of our games that we have rated so far.
Yeah, it's really nice. Kev's done a great job on it.
Hell yeah. So lastly, we appreciate all the growing support we've received in the last month. It has been so crazy and so surreal to see us grow to the extent that we have. And we hope we can keep bringing you more IG content. We have no plans to stop anytime soon. So we want to do this for a good while, and we want to increase our reach. And we have a lot of fun doing this, and we are really thankful that other people are enjoying our work too. It's been really cool.
Kev, how long do you think it's going to take for us to get famous enough to where we can meet with Obama and Michelle?
Well, we've already met with your boy Grant. Well, indirectly, you talked to him on the phone.
That's true. He's about the same level of celebrity as our former president, I think.
Yeah. My good friend Brandon used to say, give it 2 weeks. Whatever it was, just give it 2 weeks. And it'll happen. So give it 2 weeks, man. I'll probably be on here.
Also, you didn't mention the URL that people can find your new game ranking site. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Oh, yeah, you're correct. Oh, yeah, and we also have a new URL. If you also haven't heard that, you can go to the interstategamers.review, but it will redirect you to the new URL that we have, which is the igcast.com. And that's the website for just our generic podcast episodes. But if you want to go to the rankings, that would be games.theigcast.com. So it's really cool. And yeah.
Well, now that we've got the appetizer out the way,
yeah,
think it's time for some meat and potatoes?
Dude, I'm so ready.
All right, well, let me give it to you. Today we've got a classic, certified classic, OG, fun, hot, cold video game to share with you that got kind of away from me a little bit. We have a great game to talk about today. This is a Super Nintendo Entertainment System classic. Some people call it the SNES. This is a platforming game that was developed by your friends Rare, so you know it's 95% chance going to be a great game.
Yeah.
And let's not belabor the point. This game that we're going to talk about today is Donkey Kong Country.
Hell yeah. I love me some Donkey Kong, dude. And I honestly, I've never played Donkey Kong Country extensively, but I've played like bits and pieces of like the different games over the years. A lot of my friends had them on like the Game Boy Advance remakes, I think. I think those were a thing.
Yeah, they were.
Before this week, like I said, I hadn't played it much, but I had a lot of fun playing it with my good buddy Z-Link093.
Our good buddy Z-Link.
AKA Chris, who we've talked about several times on this show. So you practically know him by now, but I played that with him on stream, and it was a good fun time. He got a little bit frustrated with me, which is understandably so, because I was just being stupid. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so in stark contrast to that, I grew up playing this game fairly often, and I also ended up getting the Game Boy Advance remakes of both the first Donkey Kong Country and the second. The second being a better game than the first, most people would say. I think it's certainly its own classic. But yeah, when I was watching Kevin and Chris playing on stream, I was kind of chuckling to myself, like, look at these losers. They don't know how to do this or do that. But so it's cool that once again, Kevin and I have very different opinions on this game, or not opinions necessarily, but different backgrounds. And it's always fun when we have those different perspectives. So is there anything else, Kevin, you want to mention before we get into the ratings?
No, I think that's it, man. I'm ready to dive into those meat and potatoes.
Cool. Well, why don't you go ahead? We'll let the newbie talk first. What do you think about the gameplay, Kev?
Oh, ouch, right where it hurts. All right. Well, I'll give it to you, man. Since I am a newbie, I will say that I really enjoyed the gameplay, but I thought it could be... Okay, it was really fast-paced and it's really fun, but I think at times it's also very frustrating. I'll start off by saying that the controls felt really wonky. Z-Link mentioned this, and I thought it was a good point. A lot of actions in the game tend to happen through one button, especially for Donkey Kong. The Y button seemed to do way too much, and I don't really recall like using other buttons such as the X button and things like that. So it can kind of get, I guess, convoluted is the right word in like your control scheme. So you're like, okay, this button does that, and it turns out to be the same button every time, except for like jump. So I thought that was really weird. I hesitate to say it like this, but I've never been a big fan of games where you get hit once and you're dead. And I know that makes me sound like a terrible gamer, and you're stupid, Kevin. You're just not good at video games.
You're not hardcore.
But and yes, of course, you do have Diddy and Donkey Kong. So like if you have one or the other, or if you have both, it's practically like 2 hits. But I mean, let's be honest here. You're losing a full character, and I don't know. I think it's a little much, especially when the hitboxes in this game can be kind of, they don't make sense sometimes, or they kind of extend out farther than you would think.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really how it could be, or one of the reasons it could be frustrating.
Yeah. Before we get too much further, I do want to say this is something we should have touched upon before we really started, but this is a platforming game. You run through levels left to right, you jump over and on and past obstacles and enemies and all that good stuff. So that's kind of the gist of what you need to know for context as we talk about the gameplay. I had never really thought about the fact that you mainly use the Y button for a lot of the actions, but that's really interesting, and that's something that I kind of like about it, actually. I do recall a couple situations where I don't think it's ideal, but in general, I think the fact that there are so few controls works in the game's favor. Just because it keeps it simple. Like, you run, you jump, you bounce on enemies, kind of like in Mario. You can grab and throw barrels, and that's one of the main mechanics, is grabbing barrels and using them to defeat enemies and open doorways and all that sort of stuff. But I can definitely see where some of the actions, like the run button is the same as the grab button, basically, which is also how it is in most Mario games, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because we did talk about Super Mario World in Season 1, and I think that game has a lot of stuff in common with this game, but I don't remember us necessarily talking about those things when we did that review. So it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'll give you an instance where it frequently came up. So let's say Chris, because we played it together, let's say he got hit and he died. And so I would come into the game and I'm standing on this single platform. Well, oftentimes Donkey Kong needs to get a running start for his jump. And to get to run in the game, you have to hold down Y, but that's also the roll button. So if you're standing still, you're going to roll. Now, granted, Donkey Kong doesn't roll far, but if you're on a skinny little platform, you'll fall off. Now, I could be wrong in that there's another way to run, but as far as I knew, Y ran and rolled. So when it was my turn and I hadn't been holding down Y, I would come into the game and roll and sometimes fall off, and it was frustrating in that sense. Or I'd run into an enemy or various things like that. So there was instances like that came up, like Mario. Like you grab a turtle shell with Y and you can run with Y, which kind of works out because you could just keep running and run into something you want to grab. And it doesn't really change the character's position. Whereas in this game, Y could potentially change Donkey Kong's position. So that's why I think it's a little bit different in this sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there are ways to play around the limitation of the single button. Like if you want to run without rolling, you can jump first and then press Y while you're airborne. That's kind of like a little way around it. And granted, it's kind of unfortunate that there are workarounds for this sort of thing because it shouldn't really be a problem in the first place. But also, I think part of it comes down to familiarity and like how long you've been playing the game. So, but if you're a person who's coming in with a new perspective and you notice these things, then that means that they are valid concerns for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, I did like the pace of the game. I thought I was really quick. And as you said, I'm a noob, so I'm just like flying through these levels, and I felt not like a noob. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not a noob, or the game's just really fast. One of the two. But I thought that was really good. I also thought the story was pretty good. We mentioned looking up the controls of the game because we didn't really know everything. And when we were doing this, we proceeded to find the backstory in the game manual. And I thought that was really funny because this is like this 4-page long short novel of like the backstory of the game. So I thought it was really funny. But I think it's really good to talk about the story because it does a really good job of setting up the Donkey Kong series, the Donkey Kong Country series, as well as the rest of the characters within the Donkey Kong world. And so I thought the game did a really good job of using the characters in such a way that they had character. So I know I tend to talk about story a lot when it comes to gameplay, and I think you're more on content on that, which makes sense. But I thought it tied in really well with this.
It's funny you say that because I don't really... I mean, I know generally the backstory, but I never once considered the plot to be of like any importance to this game.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I do want to comment on what you said earlier about how you felt like you were progressing or you were moving quickly enough through the levels that you didn't feel like a new player.
Yeah.
And I was reading a little bit about the dev history of this game and some of the fun facts that were germane to that. And it turned out that they did design most of the game to where if you were a skilled player or if you like knew what you were doing, you could blow through most parts of most levels without stopping.
Yeah.
So it's definitely by design that they want you to get into that flow state, which kind of corroborates how I feel before, or how I felt before I read that fact, where I just had the feeling that this game lets you get into a flow state really easily, which is one of my favorite things about it. And I think one of the strengths of the gameplay. Like it was designed to do this, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely felt that way because the more we would play a level, the more, even if we would die at the same point every time, we would get much better at the previous parts leading up to that point.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see that, especially if you play the game over and over again. I think that leads into a really, it kind of segues into another point about the game that really works in its favor. I think this game does it revolutionized platforming in that it got really creative with the platforming. It's not just a standard like platforming game. I think there's a lot of tricks on different levels that involve the platforms that I don't think had really been done before. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least not to this caliber, I should say. And I think that's one of the reasons it makes it an iconic game is because there's a lot of crazy platforming stuff that's happening and you're just like, man, what the heck is going on? And it's so crazy and hectic. But then as you like get better at it, it's like, oh man, this is actually really fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect about the game.
Kev, I want you and Chris to keep playing through the game, even though we've already done this episode, and get to the final levels, because those are the embodiment of the crazy platforming that you're talking about. Like you ain't seen nothing yet till you get to some of those levels. I'd love to see what you think of that.
Oh, I'm excited.
But on a similar note, I think that the barrel cannon mechanic is definitely unique to this game and is now a trademark of the whole Donkey Kong series. And I was wondering how you felt about that, because that's something that I don't really think has a clear analog in too many other platforming games.
The barrels, yeah, those are pretty. I think that goes back into the creativeness of the game, and speaks to Rare's development on games, at least back in this era. I mean, I don't know. They just found ways to make things fun, and I do really enjoy the barrelness of the game.
Yeah, I love the fact that it emphasizes timing so much. Like, you don't have to worry about the position of your character, really, because all you need to do is just take a look in front of you and think, okay, I need to press the A button at this instant. But wait, there's like a B in my way, or there's, some other reason that you need to like really think about what you're doing. But just like the rest of the game, it turns out that when you get the experience or you've started to memorize a level, you can just go boom, 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 and just be launching yourself and timing everything just right. And it's a really satisfying feeling to have. Some of my favorite moments in the game, but also some of the most frustrating, are some of the barrel cannon sequences.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of funny. I don't know what made me think of this. I'm sure like a barrel like launching me onto a platform or something, but when you're like jumping around and doing all this platforming stuff, and whatever main character you are, let's say we're Donkey Kong, and Diddy's following behind you, like if Diddy doesn't make it onto the platform, he's all good because he's just like floating in midair or below the platform. And I always thought that was really funny. So just a little tidbit there about that.
On that note, you alluded to you and Chris playing together, and I think that the two-player mechanic is something worth talking about. So the way it works in this game and in all of the classic Donkey Kong Country games is that you don't control both Kongs simultaneously. You control one, and then the other one follows you. For anyone out there who plays Smash, it's kind of like an ice climber sort of situation where the secondary character mimics your movements. And the secondary character can't get hit by anything. They're just kind of a little ghost. You can think of them that way. Whenever you get hit with your current Kong, or if you switch out intentionally, then the other one takes control. And you can usually find a DK barrel at some point in every level that will contain your partner if you've lost them at some point. So that's kind of like the way that the health system works, so to speak. But back to the two-player aspect, so you and Chris each had your own controller, but whenever one died, the other one would take over. Or you can intentionally switch, like, oh, if Chris is playing Diddy and he thinks Donkey is better for this situation, he can say, hey, Kev, I'm going to tag you in.
Yeah, I really like the animation for that. It's like, all right, tag me in, bro. And he like they put their hands behind him and they like slap and like, all right, I'm in. Kind of like the WWE kind of stuff. Yeah, I really enjoyed the two-player aspect of the game. I think it definitely gives it more points in my book for that. I just really enjoyed that co-op experience and being able to do that with Chris and feeling like we accomplished things together. But we also went through frustrating times together. But it was I had a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that, yeah.
I would be interested to see how this game would do in a co-op mode if it was more like a... have you ever played Kirby Superstar or any of the modern Kirby games that have like the two-player co-op?
I did play Kirby Superstar with our good boy James.
Yeah, so I wonder how this game would play out with something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's a little different than the Kirby games, of course. But
yeah.
Donkey Kong Country Returns has this true two-player co-op where each of you is controlling a Kong on the screen at the same time. And I really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, Tropical Freeze has that too. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. So it's cool that they got to that point with the roots and the sort of tag team mode.
Yeah. Some last few criticisms I have, they're just kind of minor ones, but I thought they were important to touch on. There are some instances where there's like frame drops here and there.
Yeah.
I also thought the bosses were never really that intuitive. You primarily just kind of jump on stuff or people.
Stuff or people or things.
Or things, yeah. Really, anything that encompasses things you can jump on, that happens in the boss fight. And there's not a lot of save points, but I guess that's part of the challenge, and you go back and repeat things. But with given how frustrating the game can be sometimes, and how one might feel that they didn't warrant a death in the certain situation. I know many times I felt like I shouldn't have died, or like there's many times where it's like, well, I don't know what lies ahead of me, so how would I know this is going to hit me? I feel like there should be more save points. Once you get candy, though, you can go back and save. So it's like once you get to candy, that's good. But sometimes it was like, okay, where's freaking candy? We need candy. So that kind of got frustrating, but we played on an emulator. But I could see how that would be frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, you guys got plenty frustrated even with save states.
Yeah.
So that just speaks to it. Actually, one interesting tidbit that I read when I was researching the game's history is that it originally was a lot harder, actually, but the Nintendo people who were involved, Nintendo wasn't like super duper involved at every step, but they would, check in periodically. And Miyamoto himself had some strong opinions on certain things, but they definitely said that Rare needed to tone down the difficulty. So if you can imagine it being even harder,
gosh,
that's the game that we didn't get.
I honestly, I honestly can't. I mean, it's not that it's super hard, but it's pretty challenging. And I think if you're looking for like an old school semi-challenging game, it might be a good game for you to pick up, especially with a friend. I definitely recommend it. It's definitely a good time.
It's not stupid hard, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the animal buddies that you can get? The swordfish and the ostrich and the rhino and all that stuff.
Oh, they were really fun. It kind of reminded me of Banjo in a way, where you can kind of transform into things. And I know this is kind of like you know what? It's kind of a Rare thing, isn't it? Where you're not just the character yourself. It's like you can not necessarily always transform into another character, but you can take control of another character, which kind of switches the pace up a lot. And I think it's a really good game design that I didn't really think about until now. But I really like the swordfish. Frog is my favorite, I think. Rhinos, a really good one. I know they all have names, but I'm just naming the animals right now.
Well, I'll list all the names for reference.
Okay.
So it's Rambi the rhino, On Guard the swordfish, Winky the frog. That's probably my favorite name too. And Espresso the ostrich.
Espresso. Yeah, Espresso is kind of hard to master.
Yeah. There's also a parrot buddy named Squawk that appears in just one of the levels. He becomes more important in later Donkey Kong games. But I enjoy the variety of gameplay that they brought to the table. They don't appear too terribly often. I mean, the swordfish will appear in every water level, but the water levels are usually only one per world, if that. Not every world even has a water world or water level.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, on that note, what do you think of the game's water levels?
I thought swimming was really smooth. And for this era of like video games, not a lot of swimming games that involve swimming were really that smooth. It always felt like, crap, it's a water level, I'm gonna die. But this game it wasn't too bad. I thought it was pretty good. Especially once you got the swordfish guy, whatever his name, On Guard. That's a good name actually. But no, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do too. And they have great music too, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. But yeah, aside from all of what we just said, I wrote a lot about the gameplay, and I'm glad we pretty much got to touch on all of it. But I am personally done. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Nope, I've got all my points too.
Cool. Well, I will go ahead and rate my gameplay. So I gave this game a hot, fat, fresh, skinny 77.
77?
Yep.
This might be our most different rating ever.
Yeah, I think so. Is yours in the 90s?
It is 90.
90. Well, I will say this. I know contrary to popular belief, and it's probably the lowest gameplay score to date for me personally. But I will say this. I don't think 77 is an awful score, but I don't think it's a good score, which is kind of accurate of how I think about the gameplay.
Yeah. Well, I, on the other hand, and I fully admit that I probably have some pretty strong nostalgia goggles right now. But I just love the simplicity of the gameplay. I love the flow state that you can get into. I mean, I think that hitboxes are one of the main faults of that, which I'm actually going to talk about in visuals because they're closely related. But otherwise, I just really enjoy the sensation of playing the game, and I think it's like people keep coming back to the game, and the speedrunning community is strong and all that for a reason. I think, and I think it's the gameplay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on a lot of those things. It just wasn't strong enough in the areas that I thought important to gameplay. I don't know why. Felt like a good score to me. But sorry to surprise you like that.
Damn, dude. It's funny because I texted you earlier today, like, I can't wait to hear what you think of the gameplay.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, well, I bet you can't.
I was like, he's either going to love it or he's going to give it a lowish score. But yeah.
All right, cool.
Well, it's good to be different. So
I agree.
Are you ready for the
aesthetics? Dude,
aesthetics?
This is probably my favorite section. But yes, I am super ready. But let's get started on the visuals with my young boy, Pete.
That's me.
That's you.
So visuals. This game was pretty revolutionary at the time because the graphics were all pre-rendered 3D models that they had converted into sprites, which is something that I'm not sure a game had done prior, or not a game as successful as this game. But it was a huge selling point of the game. Like they pushed in the marketing, like it took us so many hours and so much computer power to render these graphics, and like you won't find this on the Mega Drive or the Genesis or whatever the Sega system at the time was. I'm not really familiar with those. But it was definitely a huge selling point, these graphics. And you could very easily say, and you'd be right, that they haven't aged well because, you know, pre-rendered 3D sprites is like probably the most antiquated video game graphic technique ever. Because now, you know, we have actual 3D, so what's the need?
Yeah.
But back then it was definitely a big deal. And I still think that the game looks pretty good. I mean, it comes down to like the atmosphere and the detail and all the characters. But I just kind of wanted to talk about the technical feat that it was. But I am interested to hear what you think of the visuals in general, really.
Well, I feel like they tried way too hard to do that whole 3D aspect that you talked about for what is really just a visually 2D game. I don't know. If I'm being honest, the visuals didn't really impress me that much, and I guess it's hard for me to come from a SNES perspective, and I've tried to do that for all of our SNES games, but even from the ones that we've played and the ones that I've played, I didn't think this one stood out more than those. Like, Link to the Past is definitely a much more beautiful game than this one. Kirby Superstar, Mario Kart, I really think, I don't know. I wasn't impressed. The textures felt kind of bleh. But I know we're probably going to disagree on this one, but
yeah, well, I'm already hating you just a little bit, man. Toe that line, dude. Well, it's funny that you say that you felt that they didn't stand out to you, because in my mind, like, part of what makes the visuals so interesting, whether or not they're good is kind of subjective and up to you, but they definitely stand out, I think, because no other game was doing something like this. And if you look at screenshots of this game side by side with Kirby or Link to the Past or Super Mario World or anything like that, it's just a totally different world. Like the atmosphere is so much darker and gloomier and more realistic, except for like the characters having goofy eyeballs and stuff. But like the environments are all supposed to be really dense and detailed in that more realistic way and darker. So whether or not you like the style, as I said, is up to you, but it's very different, and I don't think that's really something you could argue against.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to each their own. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I didn't. What I will say that I really did like is they decided to do some really cool things with the background. I know they were also pretty revolutionary in this aspect with like all the rain, the snow, and stuff like that. Kind of just like, I think like it's like scrolling in the background or something. I can't remember, but I really liked all the things they incorporated with that, you know, like the rain and the snow and the the factory lighting where it goes like on and off, and it kind of just like adds a whole nother element to the game, and also makes you feel like you're in that world. So I really did like that aspect. I will say there's probably too much snow and rain at times. It's just kind of like, all right, it's kind of distracting. But yeah, I don't know. I think they tried really hard to be kind of a trendsetter or like be this new era of visuals. And I guess at the time they were, but I think like you mentioned earlier, it didn't age well. And especially now that we actually have 3D graphics, it's like the importance of it is very hard for me to see.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at Donkey Kong Country Returns or Tropical Freeze, and then look at this game, and you can trace that line where it's like these new graphics of these new Wii and Wii U games, new quote unquote, is what they were trying to do back then, right? Like,
right.
And obviously the graphics of this game are 1,000,000% obsolete by this point, but it's still like that obsoleteness is still an aesthetic in itself. You know what I mean?
I want to, because I don't actually know because I haven't played enough of 2, but what is the leap in visuals from 1 to 2? What does that kind of look like?
It's I would say maybe some of the environments are a little more detailed even, but it's the same exact approach. Like they did the same technique of the pre-rendered 3D graphics, and there's also there's more variety in the environments themselves. Like there's more different types of levels. Like you have lava caves, you have non-lava caves, you have pirate ships, you have like castles, that sort of thing. So in that sense, there is more variety, or at least they introduced a whole new like round of styles, you could say, for the next game.
Yeah. I think the thing it really came down to me was I just wasn't a fan of what the textures really. I don't know. I guess I just wasn't like, this aesthetic isn't vibing with me. I don't know why. The water, I did like the water levels. I thought those were really pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the actual, like, I've been kind of fanboying over this game so far, but one pretty important critique that I do have, and this mirrors what you said earlier, is that because of the way that the graphics are, like inherently, the collision boxes aren't necessarily as precise as you would think they would be.
Yeah.
There's often times where, like, because the backgrounds are the levels themselves, they're not based on tiles like most other platforming games. They're based on like kind of like smooth organic forms rather than tiles. So because of that, the collisions aren't always precise, especially because the game's at kind of like a perspective-y sort of thing. So sometimes the ledge will end a little sooner or later than you think it might. Sometimes an enemy will hit you even though maybe their fist isn't quite touching you. And because that is so tied into the visual style, I figured I'd mention that here in the visual section rather than the gameplay section. But you did kind of mention that in gameplay.
Yeah. It was pretty frustrating for the hitboxes to be like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, you're never quite sure how far you can inch to the edge of a platform before you'll fall off.
Yeah. But you can tell that they tested the game pretty extensively because even with the wonky like hitboxes, they didn't like it wasn't like an unexpected thing. It almost feels like they tested the game and like, okay, the user should be able to make this jump. And I think every time it's just kind of like there's not a place where you can get stuck. So I think it's pretty impressive in that aspect that they accounted for some of the wonkiness of the hitboxes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that does it meet for me in visuals.
Me too, actually.
Cool. Not much else to say, I believe. Do we want to give our ratings or do we want to go to audio first?
No, let's just give our ratings.
Okay.
Let's get the pain out of the way. I feel like I'm going to be hurt.
You're probably going to be hurt.
All right, hit me.
Get ready, man. And Pete, I love you, but I don't love these visuals as much as other aspects of the game. I gave it a 72.
72.
I could feel you hurt.
Man, I don't know if I'm a big fanboy or if you're a big grouch or if we're both. You know, I don't. Someone has to be wrong here.
There might be some middle ground, and we're like both going to meet in the middle. But I think there's some sections. I think the rest of the sections we're going to come closer together.
Probably. Well, I gave the visuals a hot, fresh, cold, skinny, fat decaf 9T.
9T. That's two
Because-
9Ts.
Although they are definitely outdated, I think there is a charm to them despite that. I'm also taking into account how impressive it was at the time. And I think it's really atmospheric, like just the way that the game sets the mood with both the visuals and with audio, as we're about to talk about. I just think it does a really good job in that regard.
Wow, that's really deep. Honestly, that's that's pretty deep. And I kind of agree with you in that regard, but yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the audio, which is actually something I'm super excited to talk about. But I'll let you take it away on this one.
All right. Well, this game has a legendary soundtrack, especially some of the songs, like the main jungle theme, which is called the DK Island Swing, I believe, and also the water level track, which is called Aquatic Ambiance. Those two are some very famous pieces of music from this song. Funnily enough, our good friend Grant Kirkhope did not actually work on the music on this game. It was handled mostly by a one David Wise, with some help from a one Robin Beanland, and also a one Evelyn Fisher, or Eveline, not sure exactly. Also, I just realized that I often know the names of video game composers, but I don't really know the names of the people who necessarily design the games or the graphics or anything like that. So we should, or at least me, I should probably start learning a little more about those people, because their jobs are obviously extremely important too.
Yeah, I agree.
It was kind of weird. We all know Shigeru Miyamoto, but he's not always in the weeds, doing the actual programming.
Yeah, I feel like the graphic people aren't as recognized for some reason. Like, it's harder to find them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe there's just so much of them.
Good game graphic artists are a dime a dozen, but a composer, once you find them, you got to hold on to them.
Yeah, I know, right?
Anyway, so yeah, the music, long story short, the music's really good. Kev, you like music almost as much as I do.
I do like music.
What do you think about it?
Dude, this soundtrack is amazing. I went back and listened to it before, like, kind of while writing my review. I listened to the soundtrack.
Yeah,
and I was just like, this is awesome. Like, it was hard for me to enjoy it while streaming with Chris, because you kind of have to keep the sound on low while you're streaming.
Yeah.
But even then, I could tell it was a really great soundtrack. And just by listening to it, while I was writing the review, I was like, oh my gosh. What a trendsetter. How good is David Wise? He's just a genius. So I definitely think his work in DKC is something to behold. It is a SNES soundtrack, so I mean there's not a lot, but man, it's good. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they incorporated a bunch of different styles too, like the cave music sounds very different from the jungle music, which sounds very different from the forest music, which sounds very different from the factory, etc. The list goes on. Not much longer than that, but it does go on a little bit. And even the quality of the instrumentation itself is pretty good. Like, they have some pretty realistic sounding pianos and drum kits and brass and strings and all that stuff. So it again contributes so much to the atmosphere of the game. And the music is also very different from what you would hear in a Mario or a Kirby, especially a Kirby. Like, it's generally moodier, kind of like what I said with the visuals, the visuals are a contrast to all the other main Nintendo platformers. Same thing in this game with the music, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I love the soundtrack. It's so good. I like DK Island Swing song. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, that's the main one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the one you hear that's super popular today. But I think their theme was interesting. I feel like they should have just opened with that one, but maybe it didn't fit. I don't know. But the underwater theme was really good too. There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
There's so many good ones. As you know, I am a big proponent of sounds in video games. And I think this one also did a pretty good job of that. I really like sounds that are fun and can like make you smile while you're playing. And I think this one definitely does that. Especially when you stop with Donkey Kong and you're like, ooh, that was really bad. But you get what I'm you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It has a very, very good charm, and I think the sounds of this game are really what almost make the game for me. Almost.
Yeah. In contrast to a lot of the more serious, I'm making the game sound like a dark, gritty adventure. It's really not, because there is a fun balance of goofiness with the more atmospheric qualities. And I mean, the sound effects are a place where that's more true than ever. Like when you jump on a vulture and it goes, "Brah!" Like,
Yeah.
and the sort of like idle sound that DK makes every so often, like you mentioned. The lizards all going like, bleh, when you hit them. Like it's a very fun game to listen to.
Or the bee. He's like, "Bah."
Yeah.
It's like so pathetic, but you're like, that's awesome anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, other than the sounds and the soundtrack, I don't know how else to talk about the audio, but other than it's like what it brings to the game. And I feel like we've already done that. It's also very, I like how each enemy, and I think you've already touched on this, but it's very distinct and unique to each character, and it gives each character its own feel. I know you kind of already said that, but I wanted to reiterate that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. They don't reuse too many like enemy sound effects.
Yeah. I think it's awesome.
One thing I noticed, this is my last comment, by the way. It sounds like you're about ready to wrap up, and I am too after this. Is that the game actually, in terms of sound effects, it's actually a lot quieter than many similar games I've played. And the reason for that I pinned down is because Donkey and Diddy don't make noises when they jump. Donkey will make a noise when he lands, like because he's heavy, he'll go like a boom when he lands. But in many other platforming games, every time you jump, you hear like a little boop. I mean, every Mario game, every Kirby game, when you jump, you hear a sound.
Yeah.
And since you're jumping a lot in this game, that's a lot of sound effects that you aren't hearing. Running and walking, they don't make sounds. Even when you're menuing, like if you're selecting a level or you're selecting a file at the beginning of the game, those don't make sounds either. So it's kind of oddly quiet, really, and it goes back, once again, sorry for the broken recordness, to the atmosphere, because like when you're not hearing every single jump or every single footfall or whatever, you get to hear more of like the ambiance, because there are some like jungle-y sound effects every now and then in the soundtrack. But you hear that more and you hear the music more, and it's just really interesting. I always had the feeling the game was kind of quiet, but I never really realized it consciously until yesterday.
Yeah. I agree, man. Did you also find that the soundtrack really had some bass to it? You know what I mean?
It's all about that bass.
Dude, I love that bass. I think it really set the jungle vibe really well, just to have that kind of like, that like, ooh, kind of like apeness to it. I don't know.
For authentic audio experience, I recommend that all listeners bass boost this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. for the authenticity. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Got it in one.
Well, man, I think we're ready to wrap this section up, and I think you're going to be more pleased with my score on this one.
Let's just see about that.
Yeah. Well, I gave it a 93.
Damn. I only gave it a 9T.
Outscored ya. Yeah. All right. See,
So, Kev,
not all bad.
it turns out that I gave both my visuals and audio a 9T, which means that my aesthetics is a 9T. How about yours?
I'm sitting at a 82.5, and it's only really hindered by the visuals, but I mean, the audio is just so good. It kind of brought it back up. So I think that's pretty good score for me.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Cool. Well, that leaves us to our last section, the content.
Cone tent. 2 words, 1 concept, 1 great section that we just love bringing to you guys every episode.
Well, I'll go right ahead and dive into this one. I think, and this is just my opinion, I think this game, for what it is and what the game is supposed to be, I thought it had really good amount of content. Not all of which I got to explore. So, Peter, I will be relying on you a lot for this one, because I know you've played it extensively, and I know you know a lot about the content, as it is one of your favorite things about video games.
Right.
So I'll be relying on you a lot, but I did really like the concisiveness and the high replayability. due to the concisiveness and its pace. So you could play this game however you want to. It can be, you can rush through it and you can try to go as fast as you can, almost like a speed run if you want to do that, or you can flat out speed run if you want to. You can go and try to do all the secret levels, discover all the secrets, things like that. You could just have a lot of fun playing this game at whatever pace that you want. So I really enjoyed how flexible the game was in this manner.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned the secret levels or those secret areas. That's something that I do want to talk about a little bit because it's a pretty important part of the content. So every level, or almost every level, has a couple of bonus areas that you can reach with by going into hidden barrels. You know, the barrels are usually kind of hard to find, and they'll launch you to this bonus area. And in these bonus areas, you can usually get more bananas or more lives or some other little reward like that. If you explore all of the bonus areas in the game, then your overall completion percentage will increase. So the only way to get 100%, are actually in this game's case a 101 because they're cool like that, is if you do explore every single bonus area and, you know, complete the game in the usual sense, of course, obviously. But yeah, when you do all that, then you get that 101% completion rating. But my only issue with that, I do agree with what you said about being able to do the game at your own pace. I think that is a strength of it. But just to talk a little bit more about what the bonus areas are and like what that really adds to the content, I feel like they don't really add all that much because they're not really bonus level. Like, you're not really playing the game in the same way when you're in those bonus areas. They're more like mini games.
Yeah.
So if they were like, and I think Mario is actually good at doing this. Mario platforming games will usually have like secret areas that are still a main part of the level that will have fun stuff for you, like more bananas or power-ups or whatever, but they'll be like designed levels. It won't be mini games that are recycled throughout the course of the game.
Yeah.
At least in the Mario games that I've played. So I think that is a weakness of the bonus areas in this game. Even though they do, you know, intrinsically add to the content, it's not the coolest type of content, I don't think.
Right. I'm starting to realize that I have two kinds of content that I really like. And this might come down to personal preference, but I do like the content where there's just like, you know, just massive amounts of stuff that you can do, customize, and all that, you know, stuff like RPG elements and things like that. I do like that. But then there's something to be said about content for games that I almost want to say replayability comes into to play here, but games that you can play quickly and have a lot of fun doing in a short amount of time, but getting the most out of that time. And I think, like I've already mentioned, this game does a really good job of that. And so that is one of my praises for this game. But I will say one of my critiques is, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot added by the mini games. I kind of agree with you. It's not just like a whole like wowing experience from it. But I do think, you know, especially if you haven't done everything there is to do in the game or seen everything there is to see, it is fun to be able to still see and do those things at a high pace. You know, me being, you know, an adult now and getting older and stuff like that. Yeah, I have more responsibilities. I don't have a lot of time to play games with huge amounts of content. So that's why I think like content for the amount of time that you're playing is fairly good here. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. This is something actually that the sequels of this game really expand upon. Like, that's probably their biggest upgrade from this game is the content.
Yeah.
Like in Donkey Kong Country 2, there is an entire world called the Lost World where you unlock the levels in that world by doing things in the main game. But those are like full-fledged levels. They're also some of the hardest in the whole game. So it's like it's a much more rewarding sort of thing. Like in this game, you don't get anything really for being a completionist. You get like a 101%, and then Cranky, instead of being cranky at you, he'll say like, "Oh, you're actually talented. You actually explored everything. Good job, son." You know, like he'll say that. But otherwise, like it's all there just for you to do what you will. And if you feel like you want to get that 101, then you can do it. And if not, you don't have to, and you don't miss out on anything.
Yeah, I feel like you're a very big proponent of being rewarded for your time spent on the game, rather than that being the reward itself.
Well, I know you're saying that because of my whole Star Fox 64 spiel, which I still stand by, but like, I don't know. In that game, maybe it's different because in that game, I like really, really wanted more content, or it's like the rewards in that game weren't proportionate to what you have done, which isn't always a bad thing. It just kind of pissed me off in that one instance, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think that as a player, I always need to be rewarded for doing everything. Like,
okay.
I mean, it's cool when it happens, and if it doesn't happen, then hopefully the rest of the game is good enough to where I don't mind. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I feel you.
I don't know. I'm not like a bratty kid who always needs to be validated for everything.
That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say like you that kind of speaks to a game if they give you something for completing all of this extra content in the game. It's like, I just went out of my way to do all this stuff. It's like, what cool thing can I get? It's definitely a greater, like you would really want to get something for that, right? And I think a lot of people would. It's just kind of like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you get like an extra character or like a new skin or whatever it may be. There's not a lot of reward in playing the game themselves anyway. So you're saying that since they didn't even reward you for that either, it's just kind of like, okay, well, cool, good job,
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big proponent. The root of all of this for me is that I'm a big proponent of just extra content.
Yeah.
So like, what if you have an opportunity as a developer to like throw in a little Easter egg or like one extra little fun level or something for people who have earned it, then you can go for it. And I think it can only make your game better.
I agree, man, wholeheartedly.
I do want to mention a little bit on the topic of the story and the characters. So as I said earlier, I've never felt that the story is important in this game, but there is kind of the general gist of it is that King K. Rool is an evil lizard crocodile thing who steals your banana hoard, and you have to go get it back. And so that's what you're doing throughout the game. That's pretty much the main story. But what I think is really good about the game is the personality that the characters have, because you have like the extended Kong family. You have Candy Kong, who's like the tall blonde babe who runs the save point. And then you have Funky Kong, who's like this totally radical, gnarly dude who can jet you around from one world to the other. And then Cranky Kong is pretty much what his name says on the tin. And they're all different, and they all sometimes will like break the fourth wall, especially Cranky, in ways that are kind of funny. Like Cranky will say, like, "You're not good at this game," and it's like he's literally just talking to the player, not to the characters, really. But even the enemies, like we talked about their goofy sound effects, but the enemies, like both in terms of the sound effects that they have and like their visuals, like they're very distinct most of the time. Like, one of the most common enemies is like a big vulture, which is like not your typical video game enemy. Some of King K. Rool's cronies, just to keep the alliteration going there, like one of them is a big kind of fat dude who wears like an army helmet and his gut kind of bounces when he walks, and he'll like belly bump you out of the way if you hit him. There's so much quirkiness to all the characters that even though I don't care personally about whatever the story is, the characters are still fun.
Yeah, I agree. I love the characters. And that's what I was kind of, in our gameplay and story and content and all that stuff is different sections, but I agree with you. I really liked how this game set up all of the characters for the rest of the series, and you got to know and grow to love them over time. And I think that's pretty cool.
Speaking of characters, here's a fun fact. Diddy Kong was originally supposed to be Donkey Kong Jr., who had appeared in several games, or at least a couple before this. But Rare had changed the design of him. And in fact, Nintendo, whoever the representative was in charge of this, they thought that Rare had changed the character too much. So they said, you need to either make it look more like Donkey Kong Jr. as we have him, or just make a whole new character. And so like, oh, okay, well, we'll just make him Donkey Kong's nephew.
Wow, laying down that hammer.
Yeah. Wow. You need to either go all the way with this or just go back to what we have. And they're like, all right, we'll go all the way. Here's Diddy Kong, cool. Everyone.
That's a really cool fact.
You're going to hate him in Smash 4 in a few years.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not as bad as Bayonetta.
Yeah.
Welp, I think that does it for our content, does it?
It does, I agree.
Cool. Well, let's. What did you get for the cone tint, my brother?
I gave it a nice, round, curvaceous, sensual AT.
Oh, dude, we are spot on. I gave it an 82. Not an 82, but an 80 also.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, that's not what spot on means.
Yeah, no, I also
Damn,
gave it
son.
an 80. So, see, the only thing we really disagreed on was the gameplay and visuals, which, you have more nostalgia for, and I don't have that nostalgia. And so, for me, I just come in and I'm just like, man, why doesn't this game work like I want it to? And maybe I am a grouch.
I would also be interested. I'd also be interested to see what you would think of the game if you just played it on your own time,
Yeah.
without necessarily worrying about streaming or, God forbid, talking to Chris. Can't imagine
Ugh,
what a chore it is to play games with that person.
it's actually pretty fun.
Yeah, so number crunching, everyone's favorite part of the episode. Luckily, you guys don't have to hear it. But let's just go over our ratings again, you and I, and then we'll get into the overall rating and where it stands. So, recap of my side. I gave it a 90 for gameplay, visuals, and audio. The visuals and audio average, of course, to a 90 for aesthetics. And for content, I got an 80, which brings my IG score personally to an 86.7. So about you, my dude?
Okay, so for gameplay, I had a 77, which you were pretty upset about. And then visuals, I gave it a 72, which you were about ready to kill me. But then on audio, I brought it up to a 93. So those averaged together, I believe, is like a 82 or something like that.
Yeah, it's close to that.
And then content, I gave an 80. So overall, that puts me at a 79.8333 repeating.
Which brings our total IG rating to an 83.3.
Not too bad. Not
So
too bad.
looking at our list here, that means this game ranks number 12 out of 13. It is just above Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and just below, by 0.2 of a point, Mario Kart 64 and Pokemon Stadium.
Damn. And I think that's a really good place for it to be, in my opinion.
I would say this is a classic game, but it's not the greatest game of all time by any means. And actually, you and I's scores weren't really all that far apart by the end, because we were only about 7 points away from each other with our overalls, even though, of course, our gameplay and audio our visuals were drastically different. But as you said, we kind of inched closer towards the middle. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way that this rating came out. And I loved the fact that we had such different perspectives, as I said.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, cool. I think I was really happy with this episode. This is a good episode. I enjoyed it.
Aren't they all?
True.
Speaking of more good episodes, if you're listening to us, hopefully that means you know where to find us. But we're on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, actually. We're on Google Play, Spotify. We're on Stitcher, I think, right? And iHeartRadio as of a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Thanks to Kevin's hard work behind the scenes. You can find us on Twitter at the IG_cast, where you can find all of Kevin's musings and his teasings. He's such a tease, that Kevin.
Yeah.
And also, of course, you can find our merchandise there as well. On Teespring, I believe we are the IG_cast, or T Public, actually.
Yeah.
We are the IG_cast. Any more shout outs or any plugs you want to do, Kev, before we wrap up this baby?
Shout outs to the Yeasty Boys and shout outs to the Secret Levels podcast for supporting us. We appreciate you guys a lot. We love listening to your casts every week. And if you haven't heard them yet, definitely go give them a listen because they're good stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. 100% co-sign that endorsement.
Yeah.
Cool. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode, episode 3 of season 2. Can't wait to bring you more in the future. And until next time.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't know what else to do because I've run out of things to say at the end. So I love you guys.
See you guys later on episode 4.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See.